Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's faculty conversation. Just as a quick reminder, these faculty conversations will take place via Zoom every Monday at 12:15. These sessions, you'll have an opportunity to hear from LBJ faculty and get to learn about their background, courses, research, community involvement, PRPs, and more. At the end of each session, you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions you might have. At today's faculty conversation, we get to speak to Assistant Professor Raissa Fabregas. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you so much for joining us today. At this point, I'll just hand it over to you to tell us a bit more about your background and work here at the LBJ School.
Sure. So we're a small group, so let's keep these pretty informal. So I don't know what's the most interesting for people. I can talk a little bit about myself, my research, and the class I teach. But if there are other things, I can see Joseph and Hijo are here. If there are other things you want to chat about, we can do that since it's only like the three of us. So I'm a development economist. I joined the LBJ school in 2018. So most of my research is focused on understanding sort of what constraints, why people in developing countries might not sort of acquire sort of optimal levels of human capital. And human capital could be sort of like education. Human capital might be sort of investing in knowledge about how to do certain things. So I have projects in East Africa, sort of working with farmers and sort of like how do you sort of like get farmers to uptake modern agricultural technologies. So, I'm interested in that question, and we've been trying to evaluate different policies and, what would be the most effective way to do this. So something I've been very involved with has been like with, the expansion of mobile phones in developing countries. This has really opened up a lot of opportunities to like start using phones to provide agricultural advice to farmers. So I've been involved in a number of evaluations on that. So that's part of my research. The other part of my research is more focused in Latin America. So I do more education, traditional education work in Latin America. So I've worked with governments in Mexico and in Brazil, trying to like figure out, how, once you identify talented kids, like how do you make sure that, they go through college and they become sort of like, the next generation of, engineers and like scientists, etc. So I'm also sort of like working on that, and much of that work is in progress. And I do a little bit of, empirical work, which is sort of like downloading data sets and sort of like using, different empirical methods to try to evaluate policies. I do also like experiments on the ground. So, sort of these randomized controlled trials where you have sort of like treatment groups and control groups and you try to test these policies. And so that's sort of like my research side. Then in terms of teaching, I teach some of the econ courses. So in this spring, I'm going to be teaching development economics and evaluation methods for global development. So I can tell you a little bit about those courses, and then I'll tell you what I might teach in the fall. So development economics is an econ course. Just, it's very general in some sense because it's about sort of like development, and that, can mean many things for different people. It's very much focused on conceptual issues around, why do we think they're poor countries, right? Like what is constraining growth, for instance? And we start with some like macro perspectives. So thinking about like growth, right? And like investment in the country, we move very quickly to like micro perspectives, which is like, how do people make decisions about sort of like, should they adopt new technologies? Should they invest in education? Should they invest in like health? Like what might constrain those things in developing countries? So it's very much focused on these models, right? Like conceptual models of how we think, people are constrained. And then we spend a lot of time sort of like looking at papers, right? When they test sort of the assumptions of these models. So it's good to have background in empirical methods to take this class. And so the other class that I teach is sort of like exactly sort of the methods class. And this year, it has been set up as like the second part of Dr. Erin Lenz's course in statistics, but in some sense, as long as you have the background and sort of like basic statistics and regression analysis, you can always take this course. So this course, what it does is provides a little bit of a toolkit on how to evaluate different like policies or interventions. So we spent a lot of time thinking about like these different ways of evaluating things. We talked about experiments. How do you set up an experiment? What things to think about when you're setting up an experiment? Then we go to like non-experimental methods, which, you know, like regression discontinuity, instrumental variables, all these different things. We sort of like review all of that. And yeah, it's a lot of discussion about like how to evaluate these things. It's, you know, anyone, even if you're not interested in development, you can take this course because the statistics are the same. I just give a lot of examples from developing countries. So those are the two courses I'm teaching in the spring. In the fall, I'll probably offer a labor economics class. So that class is more going to be about sort of like just very, very much focused on the labor market. So how do people sort of decide to invest in sort of human capital? And then, you know, what do we know about labor supply, labor demand? What do we know about minimum wage, immigration? So how do you compensate someone so they're incentivized, etc. So that's sort of what that course is about. And then I'm supposed to offer a fourth course, which is still sort of work in progress, deciding sort of like what could be interesting for people. It will probably be something about behavioral economics. So thinking about sort of like psychology and econ and sort of how those things interact. But I haven't fully developed the syllabi for that course. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any questions, you know, even if you have comments about what would be interesting in terms of our new course, that'd be helpful for me. But if you want to hear about anything else, my research or like the classes, happy to tell you more about that.
Hi, Dr. Fabregas. I'll jump in here. My name's Joseph. I'm a first year MGPS student. I'm actually in Dr. Lentz's class right now. I've heard a lot about the second part course. Unfortunately, there's some other courses that, you know, and my major requirements of the first year that I won't be able to take it, but I'm looking to either work it in next spring or actually your labor economics course sounds really, really interesting. So I'm primarily focused on migration.
Okay.
And that's also why I think the labor economics course would be really interesting. If you ever did an economics of migration course, that would be one I'd definitely sign up for, but I don't know how wide the audience for that is. So I guess as far as the question, I'd just be curious to know what kind of research exposure you've had to the topic of migration, any recommended resources or just thoughts on that issue, just that kind of being where my area of focus lies in.
Yeah, interesting. So in the labor course, we definitely, I think we spent 1 or 2 lectures talking about migration. So definitely not entirely focused on that, but, you know, we sort of review a little bit of like, you know, how do economists think about migration, right? And how do we model that a little bit? And then we review a little bit of like empirical evidence on like, why do we actually know about the impacts of migration on sort of like the native population? So we spent a lot of time thinking about that. I think, have you talked to Ruth Western?
Yeah, I'm
okay, so she would be great. You know, I think like in the past, she has been working with students on migration issues, and then she sort of like channels them my way if they want to do sort of like an empirical project or something like that. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I'm happy to chat sort of like during office hours or something. And yeah, like so I think if you want like specific resources, I know more about sort of the econ literature in migration, but of course, sort of like many other disciplines sort of look at this. But if you send me an email, sort of like happy to point you to sort of like what is sort of the latest in sort of these types of things.
Great, thank you so much.
Great. Any other questions? If not, I guess I'll go ahead and just ask if you can tell the students a bit about what you think they could do to succeed in graduate school.
Ooh, that's a good question. mostly because I think succeed means many different things, right? So I would definitely, so there's two aspects to that, I think, or sort of looking back when I was doing my master's degree. I think one of them has to do sort of like with mental health and taking care of that, and just, sort of like knowing what your priorities are in life, and that, grades are important and that sort of thing, and homework, there's a lot of it, and, it seems like overwhelming, but after, you realize it's sort of like, there's other important things in life too. And sort of maintaining this balance is pretty important, I think. Also because I think it's really hard to do well in graduate school if you're not motivated and excited about sort of learning the things. Like at the end of the day, most people come back to graduate school because they care about the topic. So as long as people are excited about it, I think, they're gonna do fine, because it's kind of fun to sort of like be reading these things. So I think that's one of it. The other part, I think, has to do with like what you want to learn from, or what you want to get out of graduate school. And, it's kind of this tension, right? Because on the one hand, you want to be excited, and there's topics that make you very excited, and you want to take those classes, and, those might be the electives in like these very specific topics that you really want to like get into. On the other hand, I think it's very good for students to get tools and skills out of graduate school, right? So, all the fun stuff you probably could read by yourself. Like maybe it's hard to like discipline yourself to, sit down at night and read this cool book, but like at the end of the day, it's much easier to do that than to like try to learn like new software or like, methods by yourself. So, when people ask me like what sort of courses I should be taking, I'm always very much as like get skills, like, yes, take the fun class, but make sure that you're taking the hard classes that you're probably not going to get anywhere else. Make sure that you're taking up with like data science, with like statistics, because at the end of the day, also jobs are going to be asking for that. So I think it's a little bit of balance on how to get that, but definitely thinking about like the tools, I think it's very important.
Great, thank you. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Fabregas. My name is Hee-Ju Kim, and I am first year MGPS student, and I'm taking your development economics class next semester. And speaking of skills and tools you get from LBJ and UT during my graduate program, I am interested in taking more quantitative and empirical methods class during my time at LBJ. Mm-hmm. So right before the fall semester started, because I started business in college and I minored in economics, I know I need to hone my quantitative skills that I don't, and then build some, because I only took basic statistics in college. Mm-hmm. I want to learn more and in that area. So I took calculus before the fall semester started through UT University Extension. For someone like me who wants to focus on econ and quantitative courses during LBJ, do you recommend like what other courses should I take, and what other courses outside LBJ should I take to like strengthen my skills?
That's a very good question. I get that question a lot from, especially for people in the PhD who come with like, some degree of quantitative training that they want to take up. So I must say my course, this impact evaluation, we don't use calculus, in part because it's such a mixed group of people with different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So I've decided to, let's get the conceptual issues first, and then, if people want to like keep taking these type of courses, then they can take a course with calculus. So I don't know exactly in terms of like what counts towards the degree, and maybe like, Rachel or Laura can speak to that, because I don't want to send you and then sort of like have issues with your schedule. I think the College of Education, I've heard they offer a very good sort of like evaluation type course, but I don't recall the name. So you would have, like, I can put you in touch with another student who has taken those types of courses if you decided you want to take something like that. Other departments, I think government also offers something similar, but to be honest, I think you're better off talking to like students who have taken those kinds of courses, because I don't know exactly what these courses are. It's just sort of like students come to me and then they say like, oh, I tried to, after taking this course, then I went to take this other thing, which perhaps was more specialized or was using this specific software or something like that. But yeah, I don't know, Rachel and Laura, if you know sort of options, because I actually do get this question quite a bit, and I don't know exactly how they're counted towards the degree, and if you already have a list of sort of like similar courses, or if maybe they should be talking to their graduate advisor for that kind of thing.
It's always best probably to start with the graduate advisor, but could you sort of repeat your question again about which or what sort of classes are you looking for?
I'm looking for classes like to focus that focuses on quantitative skills and empirical methods. And I talked to Dr. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. You talk to him.
I talked to Dr. Raissa. He's our our advisor, and he recommended Dr. Fabregas' class for sure, like from before the fall semester, but she didn't teach this year. Yeah.
Got it.
And then we have a list of courses that will be counted towards like our specialization. Because Dr. Fabregas studied economics and public policy, I kind of wanted her. I was looking for her opinion on like students who are looking for PhD programs, or like looking for a job in a more finance and economics job. So if I can take something besides the courses outside LBJ, such as like learning software or taking courses in like university extension program and such.
Are you enrolled in my evaluation methods or a similar evaluation course? That would be pretty helpful.
I am enrolled in your development economics class at this time.
Okay.
And I was thinking about taking applied microeconomics course, and I think Dr. Flem teaches it, and Dr. Rade says it's sort of similar to the microeconomics class that I'm taking from Dr. Wong this semester. So he recommended that I take DevEcon this time and then take another empirical methods class or something else in the next fall.
Yeah, because if you're thinking about sort of going the direction of either the PhD or, maybe you want to work for someone, quantitative data analysis, that kind of thing, you'll probably want to take a quantitative methods course, not necessarily sort of like, conceptual course, which would be the development course, because those courses, I show you a table and then we interpret it and then we talk about the results, but I'm not telling you like the methods that they use to get that result, right? So that's what we do in the evaluation methods course. We go through the actual methods, and so those are the skills that you want to have when you apply for jobs as a research assistant or something like that. Like you want to tell, your potential employer that you know how to like actually manage data and like get these estimates.
I guess trailing off of that, it would be great if you could expand on like any career advice that you give students.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe let me give you, I don't know if you both are in the GPAs course. I get a lot of questions about sort of like working abroad. I don't know if that's something that, you're interested in. I don't know if you know about these organizations like Innovation for Poverty Action or JPAL. They hire a lot of students, of graduate school to sort of like support research projects around the world. And so, I've worked for them, and, I've hired people through them. So I know that process pretty well. And I think, for those kinds of jobs, and, there's similar organizations that these kinds of things, I think what people are looking is, of course you want to do well in school, have like, a good GPA, sort of like signal that you're a responsible person, that if they send you abroad, you're not going to drop everything and like do your own thing, but, it's good that they're paying you and that you're going to like manage things responsibly. But I actually think that, having sort of those quantitative skills and, having the skill of like managing data and knowing how to use like statistical software like Stata or R is pretty important. So that's one thing that I know. In terms of other jobs, again, I think it goes back to like showing the tools, right? Because, the exciting things about, everyone's excited about something, might be like migration or like gender or, all these different topics. I think, many people will have that and be excited about that, but what you want to bring to the table is like, do you have the technical skills to sort of like do something with your passion topic, right? So I think that's what like many jobs are looking for.
Great, thank you. Do students have any other questions?
Hi there.
Hi, Sonia.
That's for my late entrance. So I hope this isn't a repeat from something you said before. My name is Sonia Hartley. I am I don't know, third year or so. I'm a part-time student in the MPAF program. And I am also hopefully taking your development economics class in the spring. One of my last few classes before I finally make my way out of LBJ. And my question was far more on the logistics or practical side, in terms of, I'd love to hear a little bit from you what online teaching looks like for you, what you've sort of figured out works best. It's probably no secret that the APE course is going to be enormous, and I appreciate your patience in expanding the opportunities for us to take that. But I'd love to hear more about how you found online teaching to work and what that class looks like, and how students are engaging and the practical aspects of the class, not just the syllabus content, but what.
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe this is a great time to get feedback from you guys on what has really worked well. So I integrated for this spring. I must say, so I'm not teaching, or I didn't teach in the fall. So in some sense, sort of what I ended up doing in terms of online teaching was mostly like, what happened last spring, which was like, let me rearrange everything last minute to try to like salvage this course and, make it as interesting as possible for people. And my plan is right now to sort of like figure out how to develop sort of the plan for the spring, especially because it's a much bigger group of people. So usually, something that I really like to do in my courses is to have, we need lecture, because I think a lot of what I teach, it's models and conceptual things. So you want to have me lecture stuff, so sort of what's going on. But I know sort of like that can get sort of like really tiring after a while, especially if you're sitting down for 3 hours. So something I was doing before was a lot of like group work with like sort of exercises during class time. And I think that has worked fairly well in the online setting, just breaking people into groups and sort of like coming back and having that larger discussion. So, I would expect to have a bunch of that. It's a lot of my courses, I also do presentations, but with such a large group of people, I'm not sure we're gonna keep doing that. So I'll have to decide whether to convert that into like group presentations, but then it's a question of like, does everyone really participate in that? Is it gonna be just sort of boring to watch sort of all these groups go through? But yeah, so that's sort of like what I'm thinking right now in terms of structure. So it would be sort of like lecture time, and then sort of like, not always, so I don't want to sort of like promise every lecture we have sort of like this activity, but I do like including something more hands-on. And then so I need to think a little bit more about how the evaluation for each course works. So usually I do have like midterms and finals. I'm thinking that, I'm just want to restructure sort of the course for the online approach. But yeah, so I guess you'll find out a little bit, but I would love to hear sort of like input on how other courses, what's something that has not worked well at all, so I stay away from that. And if there are things that you guys, other professors have done that you think like have worked really well, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I would say that I tend to find the courses where lectures take place like real time to be really tedious. At least if they're long. If it's like a full 3-hour lecture, it gets really, really hard to get through it all. I know my favorite course is one where there's really no lecture. Like we do all the readings beforehand and we just come together and there's like a guided discussion, but there's never a point where there's like a sort of one-way lecture happening. Dr. Lentz, she does a lecture, but it's asynchronous. So her real-time class is only 2 hours and then she has an hour recorded lecture. I think it's easier to get through that on your own time, but I feel some people have had mixed feelings about that. So I can only speak for myself there. And then she does the same where, as you were saying, where when people come together for the synchronous part, it's more of like an activity or a discussion of the readings. And so I think that works well. That would be my feedback.
Okay, no, that's good to know. And, I haven't even thought about doing asynchronous things because, I just thought like synchronous would be like nicer for everyone because then you can ask questions and whatnot. And in any case, it'll be recorded. So even if you cannot make it, you could like watch it later. But it's true that if it's asynchronous, you could watch it earlier and actually, you're not as tired by the time you need to discuss things.
Yeah, I feel like it puts extra burden on y'all because I know Dr. Lentz, like she'll finish the class and then she tries to have it's on Thursday. So she tries to have her asynchronous lecture done by like the weekend. So she's kind of like, has to be prepared for the class ahead, like pretty early, as far as getting the lecture done. So I know that makes it harder on y'all, but it kind of gives us a week to watch it at our speed. I also watch it at like 1.5 times speed. So like I get through it faster and I can like, do it like while I'm washing dishes and stuff. So it's like, I don't know, in some ways it allows for a little bit more like flexibility and you can go back and rewind things like you were saying. So yeah, I thought it worked pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where like if you're disciplined and you actually watch them, it works really well. But if you're the kind of a student that's just like, Mondays 9 to 12 and that's like my time for this class, and then you don't watch the lectures, I can see how they totally like get off the rails. So anything else? Other thoughts?
I am not taking any classes this semester, but what worked really well in one of the spring classes, Professor Jima he already had a lot of structure in place in his sort of data management course. Mm-hmm. That, the information was there, the files were there, the class was already like very well set up from the beginning. So it was almost a seamless transition. I think we missed the like in-person environment, but he did a really excellent job of balancing sort of coming together as a group, splitting out into breakout groups, coming back together. So it wasn't big chunks of things, and really the engagement level was really like it helped to kind of keep the pacing of the class and taking several breaks and all those things. So that worked really well, having that and having lots of different options in terms of some of the activities were very interactive, like go to this web thing, program something, do something, or some of it was just talking or discussion or reviewing readings. So I'm a big proponent of the breakout groups when possible. smaller discussion.
Yeah, I think, it's kind of interesting because I thought people would be less likely to participate, especially when it's like a big group over Zoom. But it turned out that maybe it feels like you're the only one, so it's easy to actually talk to the screen, so that worked well. But it's true that maybe if it's like, 35, 40 people, you want to like stay sort of like active, and having those like little groups, I think that's a good way to do it, at least.
I have a question. I'm really sparked by your note on the changing up how you do evaluations. I guess, how do you think about like grading and evaluating your students as like, I guess I'm just trying to think through like, what do my grades mean in like terms of like my understanding of the material, or like how well I apply it, or I guess I'm just, from a student's perspective, I'm trying to think of like, how do I interpret my grades as a reflection of my grasp on the material and my like ability to apply. And so in order to answer that, I guess it would be helpful to know like how you think about it as a professor, and what things you're looking for, and how you give feedback, and yeah, anything along those lines would be helpful.
Yeah, of course. So that's a very good question, something I think about a lot. I can tell you sort of what I've done in the past. As I said, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to be evaluating in the spring, particularly because, finals and all of that, sort of like it changes a little bit. But so for me, I think what I want is that, you leave the class and you actually have tools, right, that allow you to say coherent stuff and to give an opinion about different things. So I'm much less interested in people memorizing things. So if you look at my exams, they're usually, usually it's a sort of like an essay, or it's sort of like a true or false, and you have to give your comments. But what's really important is I never test you just by saying like, repeat back to me exactly sort of like what I told you, right? Because at some level, I assume you all went to class, you sort of got it. So why would I ask you to repeat it back to me? So I gave a lot of like, new situations where I'm looking for you to sort of like implement sort of what you learn, right? So I tell students a lot that when they see my exams, I think that everyone just goes back to how we were trained in like undergrad, which is like, just write down everything and sort of like memorize everything. And if you put it in the paper, you'll pass and it'll be great. And I always tell them like, that's not a good approach for my class, because I don't know if you understood it, you just memorize it and you're just like spitting it out. I want to know that, like what I want to see, and this is what I tell people, is like, imagine I'm your friend and we're in a coffee shop and we're talking about sort of like, migration issues in the US. And I say, migrants have lowered sort of like wages of natives. And so how will you respond to that based on what you learn, right? In the class, like on the empirical evidence, etc. But making a coherent argument. So a lot of the answers that I'm looking for are sort of like, it's not like I'm looking for like a specific thing. It's just sort of like, how are you making the argument based on the tools that we got from class? So that's a lot of how I teach, because at the end of the day, I don't care if you memorize something or not. I just care that, 10 years from now, you sort of remember sort of what we talked about in this class. So that's what I'm going for. Sometimes, it works well, and sometimes I go back through the exams and I realize like it was a terrible question and nobody got it, and like, so it's sort of like, how do we balance that?
Thank you, that's helpful insight.
Any last questions or feedback? If not, I guess we're almost at time to wrap up anyway. So I'd like to thank the students for your very thoughtful questions and feedback, and also Professor Fabregas, thank you so much for your answers and joining us here today.
Great. Well, thank you, Rachel and Laura, for organizing this kind of thing. I know you're always sort of like trying to get everyone together and providing public goods, and it's underappreciated. So thanks for that. And thanks for coming and asking questions. I'm looking forward to actually interacting with you next semester.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Thank you all. Bye.